Do you feel the doubt pressing into your chest like dew soaking into wool, heavy and quiet, after you dared to ask me for one small sign that I'm really here? Not the loud, unshakable faith you assume I require, not the easy certainty other people seem to wear like a borrowed coat, not the steadiness you keep reaching for and coming back with empty hands. Just doubt, damp and honest and yours. And I am not turning my face away from it right now while you listen. I am kneeling down into the very question you were too embarrassed to say out loud. Before this reflection is finished, I want to bring you back to a scene I wrote down a very long time ago. It is about a frightened man named Gideon, a piece of wool laid out on a threshing floor, and a stretch of ground covered in dew. In that scene, doubt asked me for proof, and then doubt asked me for proof again. And both times I answer without a single trace of anger. There is one line near the end of it, and when you finally hear it, I want the fear that you are too unsteady for me to lose its grip on you for good. You have been carrying an idea that your doubt makes you unwelcome, that the questions circling in your mind are a kind of disloyalty, that if you really loved me, you would not need to ask again and again, and once more after that. I want to take that idea apart gently, because it has been standing between us for longer than you realize, and it was never the truth. Let me tell you what I actually see when I look at you. The doubt did not begin as rebellion. It began as a hope you were afraid to trust. You asked me for something once, quietly, in your own plain words, nothing dramatic, and then you spent the hours afterward talking yourself out of expecting anything to come of it. The mother who prays for a wandering child and then hides the prayer, even from herself, in case nothing changes, so the disappointment cannot find her twice. I am near to her, and I understand exactly what she is doing. The one who lies awake running the same unanswered question in a loop until the sky goes gray has not been overlooked by me for even a second. There's a small private list inside you of moments when you thought you heard me, and then decided later you had probably imagined it. Your prayers have grown more careful over the years, more guarded, worded so that letting me down easy, quietly becomes your task instead of mine. None of this looks like faith to you. To me, it looks like someone who wanted so badly to believe that being wrong about it felt unsurvivable. A particular loneliness comes with carrying a faith you're not sure of. You sit among people who seem certain, and you keep your questions folded up small, afraid that if you say them out loud, they will only grow, or that someone will hand you a tidy verse like a bandage and miss the actual wound. So you perform a steadiness you do not feel. You say the right words at the right moments. And all the while there is a tiring, hidden work going on underneath. A constant checking to see whether your faith is still standing. The way a person keeps pressing a sore tooth to find out if it still hurts. That checking wears you down. It is its own kind of prayer, though you would never call it that. And I have heard every anxious round of it. And notice how cleverly the doubt has learned to disguise itself. It rarely announces that it is fear. It dresses up as realism, telling you that you are simply being sensible, not getting your hopes up, protecting yourself from one more letdown. It dresses up as humility, telling you that people like you should not expect to be answered, that it would be presumptuous to imagine I would speak so personally to someone so ordinary. It even dresses up as reverence, as though keeping a careful distance from me were a form of respect. But underneath every one of those costumes is the same small, tired fear that if you reach for me fully and I am not there, you will not be able to survive it. I know that fear by its name. I'm not offended by it. I'm moved by it. So before we go one step further, breathe out slowly with me 3 unhurried times over. Let the first one leave slowly, without deciding anything about whether this is working. Let the second one reach a little lower than the first. Let the third one go all the way out without you rushing to fill the quiet that comes after it. You do not have to produce faith in the space of 3 breaths. You only have to stop gripping them so hard. Doubt makes a person breathe as though air were something they might run out of. And I am telling your body, right here, that there is enough, and that the one who gives it is not annoyed with you. Now let me show you why the doubt has felt so dangerous, because a great deal of it comes from a picture of me you did not choose. The version of me you inherited tapped his foot at unbelief. He treated every question as an insult. He kept a running tally of how many times you needed reassurance, and he let you feel each one as a fresh failure, as evidence that your faith was thin and probably fake. You were taught, back before you were old enough to weigh it, to read my silence as irritation. And so you learned to bring me only the parts of you that already believed, and to leave the trembling parts outside like muddy shoes at the door, as if I could not stand the sight of them on my floor. Maybe that picture came from a home where love always seemed to depend on getting things right, where a wrong answer cost you something. So you grew up certain that every relationship, even this one, must run on performance. Maybe it came from a room where faith was taught as a kind of pressure, where doubt was treated as a crack that had to be plastered over before anyone noticed. Maybe it came from one disappointment you never fully told anyone about, a prayer that went one way when you needed it to go another. And quietly, without ever announcing it to yourself, you decided that asking again would only line you up to be let down. Wherever it came from, you did not invent that fearful picture of me on your own. It was handed to you, and a thing that was handed to you can be handed back. That God does not exist. He never did. He was assembled out of the impatience of people who ran out of patience with you, and their tired faces got fastened onto mine. Hear the difference, because it changes everything about what you can bring me. I'm not standing over your doubt with my arms crossed. I'm not rationing my patience, watching a meter, waiting for you to cross some invisible line where I finally say, that is enough. No more questions. Let me tell you who I actually am in the presence of your doubt. I am not embarrassed by it. I am not measuring you against the people who seem to find believing easy, because most of them are far quieter about their own questions than you would ever guess. When you come to me unsure, I do not hear an accusation. I hear a door opening. Your doubt is not the opposite of knowing me. Very often it is the beginning of knowing me, honestly. The people in the old accounts who ended up closest to my heart were almost never the ones who never wavered. They were the ones who brought me their wavering and refused to leave until they had heard from me themselves. Think for a moment about how a loving parent answers a small child who asks the same anxious question at the end of every day. Are you still there? Will you be here when I wake? The parent does not sigh and say, we have been over this. Stop asking. The parent answers again and again in a softer voice each time, because the answering is not a burden. The answering is the love itself. The child is not being difficult. The child is being a child, and the repetition is how trust is built, one patient answer laid on top of another. You have imagined that your repeated asking wears on me. It does the very opposite. Every time you come back to ask again, you hand me another chance to show you that I have not moved. Before I take you out to that field, let me settle something about what you have really been asking for. When you ask me for a sign, most of the time your heart is not actually asking for a spectacle. It is asking, do you still see me? Do you still speak to someone like me? Am I still yours after everything? And that deeper question already has an answer that does not depend on the weather turning or a coincidence lining up just so. The steadiest assurance I have ever given is not a wonder in the sky. It is my word, already written, already spoken, waiting on the page for the moment you are ready to let it reach you. I did not leave you to guess about my heart and hope you guessed right. I wrote it down. The reason I keep bringing you back to lines like the one waiting at the end of this reflection is that they hold more weight than any single sign ever could, because a sign fades by afternoon, and a word I have spoken stays spoken long after the dew has dried off the ground. And I will be honest with you about why I do not usually hand out the spectacle, even though I could. It is not because I am withholding. It is because a spectacle would give you a moment of certainty and leave you a stranger. I am not after a person who is merely convinced I exist. I am after a relationship with you, the slow and real kind. The kind where you learn my voice the way you learn the voice of someone who has never once left the room. If all I gave you were signs, you would keep coming back for signs, and you would never come back for me. So I give you enough to trust, and I stay near while your trust learns to walk. That is not neglect. That is a father who wants to be known, not just believed in. And you will come to recognize my voice not by how loud it is, but by what it does inside you. The voice that shames you and leaves you frantic is not mine. The voice that quiets you, that draws you back toward honesty instead of hiding, that leaves you feeling more like yourself and less afraid. Even in the moments when it gently corrects you, that steadiness is how you learn to tell me apart from the noise. You have heard me more often than you have given yourself any credit for. Some of the moments you brushed aside as coincidence were me. Some of the sentences that arrived at the exact moment you needed them and calmed something you could not calm on your own were me. I have been speaking the whole time. You have been so braced for silence that you kept mistaking my voice for your own better thoughts. Now let me tell you about Gideon the way it actually happened, not the polished way it sometimes gets repeated. When I first called him a mighty man of valor, he was not standing on a hilltop with a sword raised. He was crouched down in a winepress, threshing out a little wheat in a hidden place so the raiders who had been stripping his people bare would not see him and take even that. He was afraid. He was hiding. And that is the exact moment I chose to call him mighty. Look at what I did not do in that moment. I did not correct his fear first. I did not require him to feel brave before I would use him. I met a hiding man inside his hiding place and spoke to him as though the courage were already planted in him, because I could see who he would become long before he could feel it. That is how I speak to you as well. I address the person I know you are, not only the frightened one you feel like on the days when the doubt is loud. He did not agree with me, by the way. He told me his clan was the weakest in the whole region, and that he himself was the smallest and least important in his father's house. He asked me, if I was truly with him, then where were all the wonders his grandparents used to talk about? He was not a hero reaching for a mission. He was a discouraged man arguing with the God he was not sure he could trust. And I did not withdraw the calling because he questioned it. I stayed in the conversation. When he asked me to wait while he prepared an offering, I waited. When he needed to see something with his own eyes, I let him see it. And when fire rose up and consumed what he had brought, he was suddenly afraid he had seen too much and would not survive it. Do you know what I said to him then? Peace. Do not be afraid. Even his terror at my nearness, I answered with gentleness. And then he did the thing that people either skip over or quietly hold against him. He took a fleece of wool and laid it out on the threshing floor. And he said to me plainly that if dew came down on the wool alone and the ground around it stayed dry, then he would know that I would do what I had promised. It was the request of a man who wanted to believe and could not make himself sure. And I did it. The wool came up soaked, heavy enough to wring out a bowl of water, and the ground lay dry all around it. You would think that would settle it. It did not settle it for him, and this is where his story quietly becomes yours. He came back to me and asked me not to be angry, and then he asked me to do it one more time the other way around. Let the wool stay dry, he said, and let the dew fall on all the ground instead. He deliberately built the second sign to be harder to explain away than the first, because the doubt in him was still whispering that the first one might have been a trick of the weather or a trick of his own hoping. Notice what he braced for. He expected my anger. He led with an apology. He steadied himself for the God who taps his foot and sighs. And that is simply not the God who answered him. I need you to hear something before I tell you what I did, because people have turned this scene into a formula, and it was never a formula. I am not handing you a method for putting me to the test. This is not a technique for wringing a sign out of me before you are willing to move, a way of bargaining with heaven until I perform on cue. That is not the lesson. And anyone who sells it to you that way has missed the whole heart of it. The lesson is not the wool. The lesson is what kind of God kneels down a second time for a frightened man who could not steady himself, and does it with no rebuke at all. I am not teaching you to demand proof. I am showing you a heart that meets honest doubt without a shred of contempt. If the doubt in you loosened even a little just now, tell me so. One word, wherever you happen to be sitting. Heard. Not for anyone else to notice. Only so the most honest part of you has said it once, out loud, that it wants to be heard by me, and has been quietly afraid that it was not. So, here is the line I promised you at the very beginning. It is written in the book of Judges, chapter 6, verse 40, and it is not spectacular. And that is exactly the point of it. It says, "And God did so that night. The fleece was dry, and there was dew on all the ground." Say it back to yourself slowly, clause by clause, because the whole tenderness of it is tucked inside how ordinary it sounds. And God did so. Not. And God refused. Not. And God finally ran out of patience with this man and his endless need for reassurance. Not. And God gave him a lecture about the immaturity of having to ask twice. Simply this: I did what he asked. The second time, after he had already been given one sign and still could not stand on his own faith, after he had apologized for even asking, the floor lay heavy with dew on every side, and the square of wool sat dry in the middle of it. And the only thing that reversed sign ever proved was how far I am willing to go for someone I love who is struggling to believe me. There's a detail in it worth slowing down for. That small phrase, "that night," tells you I was at work in the dark while he waited, doing quietly what he had asked, not making a show of it. And notice that he made the second sign harder than the first on purpose. He was not being greedy. He was being honest about how deep the doubt went. Honest enough to admit that the first wonder had not fully reached the frightened place in him. And rather than holding that against him, I honored it. I would far rather have your honest, stubborn, second time asking than a polite, pretending that everything inside you is fine. There was another man, much later, who cried out to me that he believed and needed help with his unbelief in the very same breath, and I did not turn away from him either. Both things can be true in you at once. You can believe and still be asking for help to believe. That is not hypocrisy. That is what real faith usually looks like from the inside. Look again now at the question you carried into this reflection. Am I too unsteady? Too full of questions? Too quick to doubt? For God to bother with someone like me? Here is your answer. And it is not an idea. It is a wet field and a dry cloth. I did it once, and when once was not enough, I did it again backward, on purpose, so the frightened man would have less room to talk himself out of it. I would have done it 100 times. The same tenderness that stooped to answer a doubting man in a hidden field is the same tenderness that later led my own son to walk straight up to a doubting friend, hold out his wounded hands, and say, "Reach out and touch. Stop doubting and believe." I do not run from honest doubt. I move toward it. That is who I have always been, underneath the impatient face someone taught you to expect. And if you know the rest of his story, you know the doubt did not simply vanish the moment the wool went dry. He still went out trembling. I still reduced his army until all he had left was a small handful of men and every reason to be even more afraid. And even then, knowing his courage was thin, I let him creep down to the edge of the enemy camp to overhear something that would steady him one more time. I kept meeting his fear with kindness the whole way through. I did not answer him once and then expect him to be finished needing me. I walked the entire road beside him, reassuring a man who stayed a little unsure right to the end, and I used him greatly anyway. I am not looking for the version of you that has no fear left. I am looking for the version of you that keeps turning toward me inside the fear. While you have been listening, feel your jaw for a moment and notice, without scolding yourself for it, whether it has been holding itself tight. If it has, let the back teeth come apart just slightly and let your tongue rest down soft against the floor of your mouth. Doubt clenches the body long before the mind will admit it is afraid, and you have been braced for a disappointment that is not on its way. Here is one small thing you can carry with you into the rest of your week, and it is lighter than you think. The next time you catch yourself about to hide a doubt from me, to smooth it over, to pray the tidy version of the prayer instead of the true one, bring me the true one instead. Say it as plainly as it lives in you. I am not sure. I want to believe, and I am afraid to. I asked you for something, and I have been talking myself out of hoping ever since. You do not have to manufacture certainty before you come. You do not have to arrive already convinced. Certainty was never the toll at the door. The doubting man in the winepress did not become sure and then get answered. He came doubting, and I met him right there in it. And here is a second small thing, if you want it. When the doubt rises and you feel the old pull to hide it, try naming just one true sentence out loud before you decide anything about whether it is working. Not a performance of faith. One honest sentence. I am here, and I am not sure, and I am staying anyway. You would be surprised how much room that one sentence makes. Over time, bringing me your honesty instead of your polish will change more than your prayers. It will change the way you sit with other people who are quietly doubting, because you will stop needing them to be certain in order to feel safe near them. You will slowly become a person others can bring their questions to without fear, the way you have been longing to bring yours to me. The tenderness you receive in the field does not stay in the field. It spreads through everyone you touch. Bring me your honesty. That is the offering I have always wanted from you, more than your certainty, more than your performance, more than the confident words you assume I am waiting to hear. Gideon brought me a fearful heart and a square of wool, and I received it as gladly as any gift ever laid on any altar. Your unsure, reaching, half-believing heart is not a lesser thing to bring me. In many ways, it is the truest thing you own. And when you hand it over exactly as it is, damp with all its questions, I do not weigh it and find it wanting. I take hold of it, and I take hold of you, and I begin, patiently, to answer. You may not feel anything shift the first time you do this, or the 10th, but somewhere around the 30th time you bring me the honest version instead of the presentable one, you may notice that the doubt no longer feels like a locked door standing between us. It becomes just another thing you talk to me about, the way Gideon talked to me, the way a person talks to someone they are slowly learning they can trust with the unfinished parts of themselves. That is not weak faith. That is faith learning to breathe. And I want to be clear about what I am promising you, because I will never sell you something I did not actually say. I'm not telling you that a sign in the sky is coming with a date attached to it, or that every uncertainty in your life will resolve the way you have been hoping by some hour you have privately circled. The people who promise you that are not reading from anything I wrote. What I am promising is steadier and quieter and truer than that. I am promising that your doubt does not send me away, that your questions do not wear me out, that when you come to me unsure, you are not an inconvenience I merely tolerate. You are a child I stoop toward, the way I stooped over a threshing floor for a man who was certain I would be angry, and found instead that I was not. Something changes in a person the first time they let a doubt be fully seen and discover they are still held. The doubt does not always disappear, but it stops being a secret, and a doubt that is no longer a secret loses most of its power to divide us. It turns into a place where we meet instead of a wall we stand on opposite sides of. That is what I am inviting you into. Not a faith with no questions left in it, but a friendship honest enough to hold the questions out in the open, where I can answer them one patient, dew-soaked answer at a time for as long as you need me to keep answering. So let the old picture go. Your doubt did not disqualify you. Your questions did not exhaust me. Your need to ask a second time did not make you any less mine. The wool came up dry and the ground came up wet, and none of it was ever a test you had to pass. It was only ever a window into how patient I am willing to be with someone I have already decided to love. You have been bracing for a rebuke that was never coming. What was coming the whole time was me. Amen. Before you go, let me ask you something. What is the one doubt you have been too embarrassed to bring me? The question you keep deciding is too small or too faithless to finally say out loud. Put it in the comments below, even a few words of it. There is not a single doubt in that whole list I will roll my eyes at. And if someone you love has been wondering whether I still speak to a person like them, pass this along.